ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Professor Jeremy Phillips in his usual impassioned and unbelievably provocative and thought-provoking mode. And I don't want to gild the lily about him except to say that when he talks about not joined-up policy at government level, a simple fact, we in this country were the first in 2007 to actually appoint a politician to be a minister for IP. And in 5 years, we have had 5 such ministers. Not one of them had really had time or perhaps even the inclination to master the brief. And IP is still talked of as being very important by the politicians, but it's lip service. So I can only echo what Jeremy has said about that. Anyway, enough of the gloom. You can't do anything about politicians not understanding IP, although I actually, and it's not a party political point, but it is a point that the person responsible for IP in the Labour Party is actually a highly intelligent person who does understand IP, and I had some very interesting conversation with him. We'll see what happens. Enough of that. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce Shireen, whom I met about 7 or 8 years ago at Queen Mary when I was I still am, a visiting professor there. And she immediately struck me as a most unusual and interesting and challenging person. She was not afraid to pick me up on points I made in various lectures and speeches. She was, any person who speaks to an audience is looking for an eye, or 2 eyes preferably, that dance with interest and challenge, and Shireen was one of those. It was good enough just to fasten my eyes on her, not only because, let's be honest, she's a very pretty lady, but because she was highly interested. And it was a pleasure to speak about this peculiar subject called IP to her. She wanted to know more and more. And then she told me that she set up a business of her own. Well, that was music to my ears, because that's what I did, I dare say foolishly, in 1970. I just qualified as a patent agent, as it was then called, and like an idiot, without clients and without money, I set up a practice. As it happens, it took a while to flourish, but flourish it did. But since then, anybody who was willing to take on the task of a practice, and let's be honest about this, a female, because there was still quite a bit of prejudice, certainly in the patents field. I don't know so much about copyright and branding, but there was prejudice. So any woman who said, I'm going to run my own practice and it's going to be great, had my immediate emotional support. So I was very taken by Shireen, and we had many pleasant meetings, both at her office and at a very nice place called Ottolenghi, recommended. No, I don't get a commission. It's a lovely place in Islington where they do brilliant lunches, and you can, encouraged by such a brilliant lunch, you can talk about all aspects of IP, whether it's about marketing it, strategizing it, how to develop a practice. And it's been my pleasure and privilege to make a small contribution to the success she's made of her practice, and she has my full admiration. She's been a solicitor almost unbelievably for 25 years. She's been an IP specialist for about 15, is it, or thereabouts, and she has made her practice a flourishing one. But as Jeremy said, she's above all always wanted to help the small businesses, and that is again something that I wholeheartedly approve of, because as the old chestnut goes, or it's not chestnut, it's acorn, from a small acorn, big oak trees go, and she has certainly helped in that regard. So I think without further ado, I commend Shireen to you, her book, and maybe I can introduce her to you now to make a short speech of her own. Thank you.